Hi guys, welcome back to the Outer Server. So in today's video, I'm going to show you guys how to update the firmware on a Supermicro SAS-3 backplane. So this here is the Supermicro BPN-SAS3-826EL1. This is a SAS-3 single expander backplane from the 826 chassis, which means it is a 12 by 3.5 inch drive backplane. Now, this procedure I'm going to show you guys today will also work with all the other Supermicro SAS-3 backplanes, like from the 836 chassis, as well as the 846 or 847 chassis as well. So I've got this backplane hooked up with power over here, and I've got two SAS cables plugged in, which are connected to a SAS-3 HBA. That's a Dell H330 converted to IT mode. So it's basically like a 9300-8i. Now, before we get started, I just want to mention that the procedure to update the firmware on this backplane provided by Supermicro is faulty. Do not follow that procedure because in many cases it will brick your backplane, and Supermicro will basically say, well, you have to send it in for repair. So don't follow that procedure. I'm going to save you the hassle and the headache of that faulty process, and I'm going to show you the right process on how you can update this firmware correctly without causing any damage to your backplane. All right, so let's get started. All right, guys, so I'm booted up in the machine, and first of all, let me tell you what the requirements are for the utilities and the files that you need to do this update. So first, you need a different tool than the SAS2 backplanes, and this tool is called the CLIXTL program. And if I run it with -H, which kind of lists all the options, you'll see that I have version 7.10.c, and this is from Supermicro. So you can find this utility on Supermicro's website and download it and put the binary tool in somewhere in your path so that you can call the program. All right, so I do recommend that if you are going to use this, read over some of these options so you kind of have a better understanding of what they do. All right, so first thing, go download the CLIXTL tool. All right, the second thing is the update files. So there are two files that you need. There is a .bin file and a .fw file. Okay, so the .bin file is the smaller file, by the way. So if you're not sure what you're looking at, look for the smaller file. This is what they call the manufacturing file. It basically has configuration data for your specific backplane, including things like your SAS address, enclosure ID, and whatnot. And the next file that ends in .fw is the larger file, and this is the actual firmware for the SAS expander. And these two things have to work together. And in the SAS2 firmware update, I went through this very elaborate tedious process of basically modifying the SAS address and whatnot in the manufacturing file. In this case, we actually don't need to do that because the CLIXTL program will handle that for you if you know how to do it correctly. And that's the main problem, is that the release notes. So let me show you the release notes. This is the release notes with a few of my own notes added in there. So this is the release notes from March 2019 from Supermicro. And if you come down here, they tell you, here are the steps on how to perform this update. Do not, and I put in these warning signs here to just remind myself, never, if I happen to look at this and forgot that this was bad, this is me reminding myself that this last command here, okay, is not the right way to do it. This command, the way it's written here, or the way it's suggested here, will not update the manufacturing file content to match your SAS expander, and will basically put in, I think, like the generic, whatever the default is, and that's not going to match the firmware. And so the SAS expander, basically, in some cases, people have reported basically your SAS expander won't start up anymore, and you'd have to perform some sort of out-of-band process to basically update this file. So do not ever run this command unless you know what you're really doing and have intentions to do it this way for a specific intention, right? So anyway, that's the process that's given to you in the release notes, and I've basically learned from other people's mistakes and basically wrote down my own instructions on how to do this, and I'm going to walk you guys through this, but these will be kind of my own notes to kind of guide myself, you know, in showing you guys how to do this. Okay, so first thing, let's go to the right side window here. Let's just run this tool, and if you run it with -list or -L, it'll show you the SAS expanders that are visible. And right now there's only one because I've only got one plugged in. And the key thing is to note this SAS address because you'll be using that to address the SAS expander. And this is the problem when you don't have the correct SAS address on it and the expander tries to boot up with a different SAS address. I think it, you know, either wigs out or something goes wrong with it, and then you can no longer communicate with it. So anyway, this is important to have this SAS address. And now if you want to know a little bit more about your SAS expander, you can do -info or -I or -info or -I and --target. And I like to kind of spell things out just so that you know what these options are, but all these options can be specified with the -- and, you know, a word or dash letter. And so --target is the same as -T. And target will be the SAS address, so it tells the command that that's the SAS expander you want to refer to, and this will provide you with information about the current SAS expander at that SAS address. And so you can see here there's unit specific information. All right, so this is basically the most crucial part out of the manufacturing data is the SAS address and enclosure ID. And if you have a dual expander backplane, you will probably have a unique enclosure ID. In this case, because this is a single SAS expander, the SAS address and the enclosure ID are identical. Okay, so further down here you can see that here are the current firmware versions. So the firmware sits in regions 0, 1, and 2, and then the manufacturing data sits in region 3. Okay. And this is, I think, very similar to the SAS2 expander. I believe the region 0 is considered the boot region. So I think that's like the original firmware that, you know, is came from the manufacturer factory, and it's what the SAS expander will, I think, attempt to boot from if nothing else works. And region 1, I believe, is the active, and then region 2 is the updated firmware. Okay, and region 3 again is the manufacturing data. All right, so one thing I also want to point out, just as it was in the SAS2 backplane, if you do LSCSI, you'll see here is the enclosure, so that's the SAS3 backplane, and it lists the firmware as 0601. Okay, so this is a hexadecimal representation of the two numbers in the middle of the full firmware specification. Okay, so this 06, this is in decimal here, and 06 is less than 16, so the hexadecimal representation is identical. But if when this is above, you know, 15, you're going to see this represented with, you know, a letter like A or B, C or D, that kind of stuff. All right, so anyway, that's how you kind of correspond this number to the firmware version over here. And I think the firmware we're updating to today is this .16.11. So you're going to see this later in hexadecimal form, or more apparent as hexadecimal. Right now it's, you know, looks almost the same. So, all right. So let me first, I'm going to take this info, and I just like to save that information just in case. So I'm gonna, the unique part of the SAS address is the last 8 characters here. So I'll just save it like that. And so this way, if for whatever reason I can't communicate with the SAS expander, at least I have this information to try to repair it later. Okay, so with that information, there are 2 ways. So let me explain this to you guys. Let's look at my notes again. And there are 2 ways to perform this update. So there's this one method that uses -a option, and let's take a look at what that means. All right. So here is download both firmware and manufacturing to flash in one single command. Basically, this is an all-in-one command. All right, and you have to specify USC. Okay, and this is important. This, I believe, stands for unit specific configuration, is my guess. This basically tells the command that you want to maintain this unit specific information during the update process. And so just like in the SAS2 process to update the SAS2 backplanes, you have to modify the manufacturing file to include this specific information. And in the SAS2 example, I did it manually. I had to figure out how to do that and manually did it and update the checksum and all that stuff. With this new tool, the CLIXTL tool, it will basically do it for you, but you have to specify this USC option. Okay, so you can run this CLIXTL-A USC-T for target, and that's the SAS expander SAS address that you want to update, and then -D, and then you give it a folder or directory that has both firmware files. So you'll want something. So I have it in this directory called firmware, and these are the two files that need to be there. All right, so the .bin for the manufacturing and the .fw for the actual firmware. If you have more than one .bin or .fw file in here, I believe this command will error out. Basically, it won't know for sure which file to choose, so it just aborts, I believe, is what I've read. I haven't actually tested that, but anyway. So this seems like doing it this way seems like the most expedient process. However, this process, from my experience, only updates regions 1 and 2. Okay, so these two regions here. It does not update the boot region, and so you'll still maintain the kind of the factory default firmware in the region 0. Okay, now if you don't like that, you can manually update region 0, but that's an additional command, and that would be this command here. All right, so you do CLIXTL-F for the firmware and give it the number for the region, and so that's 0, because like I said, that's the one that doesn't get updated with this -A process. Give it the target SAS address, and then again give it the path to the firmware file. That will manually update region 0 with this firmware version. And then finally, you need to reset the SAS expander with this command over here, and then you're done. Okay, so this updating region 0 is optional. Some people, it bothers them a little bit if there's inconsistencies. It kind of bothers me, so to be honest. So I tend to, if I'm doing it through this process, I'm going to also flash region 0 as well. All right, so now there's an alternative method, which is a little bit more manual, but it kind of covers, it's the same number of steps really, but it's a little bit different. So, okay, so here's the alternate method. This method uses this command. All right, so this is the CLIXTL-F all. Okay, so all will tell this program to apply the firmware update to all regions where it applies. And so that happens to mean basically region 0, 1, and 2. All right, so all three of those. And so that kind of takes care of all of that. But you have to also update the manufacturing region manually in a separate command, and that's this command here with the -C. All right, so that's actually really, really important because that's the mistake that is shown in the release notes from Supermicro. So let's talk about what that means a little bit. All right, so here -C means carry, and it's kind of a weird command in my opinion, but basically it says when it's downloading or it's updating the manufacturing data, okay, basically keep the current unit specific configuration. So basically keep this information. All right, and so it's going to update the manufacturing file before it runs the update. So basically it's going to pull this information off the SAS expander, put it in the manufacturing file, and then update the manufacturing data with that modified file. Okay, so that's the important part, and that's the critical mistake that is in the release notes from Supermicro. So we can do it this way or we can do it this way. It doesn't really matter. Both will basically get you the same result. I think today I'm going to do it this way, and if you guys want to try it the other way here, basically you can freeze the video here and just write down these commands. I'll also put these down in the description of the video, so you can cut and paste it from there if you want. All right, so let's go ahead and do this. All right, so that's the SAS expander. All right, so I'm going to do -A, USC, -T. I need to give it the SAS address, and then -D. And this needs to be a path to a directory with both the firmware and manufacturing file. Now, one thing I struggled with a little bit was, so if you recall, I have this in my firmware folder, right? So when I first tried to do this, I did it like as you see on the screen, and if I hit enter, it says error, incorrect file directory. And so it got me scratching my head, and basically what I found out was that this path that you're giving to the folder has to be the absolute path. You cannot give it a relative path. For whatever reason, this program doesn't understand that. And so in my case, this is the full path to the working directory that I'm in, and then there is the firmware folder. So if I give it the full path, this should work just fine. So let's go ahead and do this. All right, so as you can see, it's updating region 1, not region 0. It skips over that. All right, so region 1 is done. Now it's updating region 2. All right, now, well, that went really quick. The manufacturing data went really quick. So you can see that after region 2, it did region 3, which is the manufacturing page, and that is completed. And because we specified -A USC, it should retain all the unit-specific information. So if I go ahead and, let's see here, if I do -I, which is for info. All right, so you can see that region 1 and 2 were updated. Region 3 was also updated, but region 0 was not, and it retains the original firmware. Now, I personally don't like that, so I'm going to also update that as well. So I do that by doing -F, region 0, and that's the target, and then I give it the firmware file. I don't know if this is going to work here. Let's see. Will it take a relative path with this version? Nope. Okay. All right. Got to do the whole full path thing again. All right. All right, so that hopefully should work. Well, actually, you know what? Let me just be specific and give it the firmware file itself. Okay, let's see if this works. All right, looks like it took, and now it's updating the firmware region 0. I think probably the proper thing, as I'm thinking about this right now, The proper thing to do probably is to reset the SAS expander at least once before updating region 0, just to make sure that the new version works, because I think region 0 basically is the backup, and you kind of want to verify that the update actually works before erasing the backup firmware, basically. All right, so it's done. If I run the -info now, you can see that region 0 is also updated. All right, so now the next step would be to do a reset on the SAS expander, and like right now you can see that it's still running the old firmware because I haven't reset the SAS expander, and hopefully if I reset it there's no problems with the update and it should show up. You know what, here, I'll run that command so you guys can see. Here's the SAS expander. All right, and here are some of the logs from the system. All right, so here we go with the reset. So this is, the command is CLIXTL-T, the SAS address, -R for the reset. Okay. All right, you can see that the SAS expander went offline. All connections are down right now. Give it a few, oh, here we are. It's now back online. And yep. So you can see now all 8 links, which are 12 gigabit links, are up. And you can see that the firmware version is now 100B, right? And so like I said, this is a binary or a hexadecimal representation of 11, right? So the 10 represents the 16 because that's hex for 16, and then the 0B represents the 11. All right, so basically we were successfully able to update the firmware, and at this time if I run the -info command again on the right side here, you'll see that everything is updated and we retained the original SAS address and enclosure ID. All right, so basically that's it, guys. I don't have another expander, or otherwise I would show you also going through the other method here. But again, I'll leave all these commands and stuff like that down in the video description, so you can cut and paste those if that makes it easier for you guys. And as far as the firmware files, I've been basically having to contact Supermicro directly to ask them to send that to me. You could try that. I might host a copy of the firmware, but you know, I would say if you're watching this video, you probably want to get the firmware file directly from Supermicro. The one that I showing you might be out of date by the time you're watching this video, so I would just say, you know, contact Supermicro, see if they'll send it to you. Lately, some of their support folks have been maybe not as helpful as they used to be. I've worked with Supermicro for many years, and in the past they were extremely helpful, and I've just noticed that lately some of their people have not been as helpful. Maybe they're hiring a lot of new people and they're just not well trained or something like that. But anyway, if you can't get the firmware from them for whatever reason, I'll see if I can at least host the version that I have somewhere for you to download. So if I do that, I might leave some links down in the video description. If not, you know, if you don't find it there, contact me. Go to artoserve.com, click on contact, and you can reach me there, and I can, you know, provide you with what I have. I might not have the latest version. Alright guys, so that's it for today's video. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you're new to this channel and you like this sort of stuff, consider subscribing to the channel. Also, if you know of anybody who can benefit from this content, please be sure to share this video with them so that more people can benefit from this video. And finally, if you want to support my channel, go check out my eBay store. I've got the best selection of pre-flashed IT mode HBA SAS controllers for your ZFS, TrueNAS, or Unraid builds, so go check out the link down in video description. Thank you very much for watching, and have a great day. Bye-bye.